Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. The weekly indicators were in the wrong direction this week. ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence dropped 3.4 points to 85.9. Driving that fall was people having less confidence about their own personal finances over the next 12 months. And ANZ Roy Morgan inflation expectations increased 0.2% to 4.9%. In line with its average over the last 3 months. Now to employment and unemployment, the measure that really matters. And the news for August is not good. Real unemployment surged in August, up 0.8% to 11.1%. So an estimated 1.78 million Australians are unemployed. That means they're looking for work, they don't have a job. The main driver of that increase was a drop in overall employment, down by 70,000 to around 14.2 million. Part-time employment fell by more than 100,000 jobs to just under 5 million, while full-time employment increased slightly, up by 35,000 to just over 9.2 million. In August, underemployment, people wanting to work more hours, was unchanged at 1.74 million. Of some concern though, this is the first time both unemployment and underemployment have been above 1.7 million in the same month. So total unemployment and underemployment, what we might call workforce underutilisation, was up 0.8% to 22% of the workforce in August. An estimated 3.52 million people. And that's the highest monthly figure since early in the pandemic. This is the 9th straight month, stretching back to late last year. The total unemployment and underemployment has been above 3 million. Now for some in-depth historical analysis of the Roy Morgan trove of data on social issues in Australia, to shed some light on the changes we're all seeing and experiencing. First, homosexuality is immoral, according to 21% of Australians. Now, Roy Morgan's latest analysis into views on homosexuality shows 2 decades of declining homophobic views. No surprises there. But there's been a recent reversal in views. So since 2000, Roy Morgan has been monitoring Australians' views on homosexuality, asking approximately 1,000 Australians each week, that's 50,000 a year, whether they agree or disagree with the statement, "I believe homosexuality is immoral." In 2001, 36% of Australians agreed, compared to 21% today. That's a decrease of 15 percentage points over the past quarter of a century. So the data shows a steady decline for 2 decades, falling below 30% for the first time in 2009, and then down to 18% by 2017. That's at the time of the same-sex marriage plebiscite. However, over the last 5 years, since June 2020, the downward trend has stalled, and the belief that homosexuality is immoral has edged back up to 21% by 2025, marking the first sustained increase in over 2 decades. New Roy Morgan analysis of a decade of research into the issue of immigration shows almost 1 in 7 Australian electors now say that managing immigration and population growth is an important issue. That's 13% of Australians. And that's a figure that's more than doubled since the end of the pandemic, but it's still lower than pre-pandemic. Over the last decade, from July 2016 to June 2025, Roy Morgan interviewed a representative cross-section of 456,000 Australian electors and asked which 3 issues are the most important to you. The long-term trend since 2016 shows the issue of immigration reached a high of 16% in 2019 before declining during COVID to only 6% in June 2023. Since then, the importance of immigration has surged as an issue, and as immigration to Australia increased, is up 7% to 13%. The high importance Australians placed on managing immigration and population growth before the pandemic followed a 35% lift in net overseas migration to Australia between 2015 and 2018, and a significant increase in allegations of fraud with higher education colleges and institutions involving foreign nationals during those years. Today, the issue is more about housing and infrastructure resources, cost of living, and the associated concerns about crime. Recently, the voting trends of immigrants to Australia, and especially Indian Australians, has been in the national spotlight recently, with controversial comments made by Liberal Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. Last week, Senator Price claimed a recent Redbridge poll told us that 85% of those who have Indian ancestry voted for Labor on a two-party preferred basis. However, Roy Morgan's in-depth analysis, based on electors born in India, shows that while Labor does lead the Liberal National Coalition among Indian Australians, the figure of 85% is clearly inaccurate. Among Indian-born Australians, 45% support the ALP, compared to 39% for the Coalition and 8% for the Greens. That's a gap between the two major parties of only 6 percentage points, and it compares to about a 3% gap for all electors at the last election. Combined support for the two major parties at 84% is far higher among Indian Australians than the result at the recent federal election, which was 66.4%. That means Indian-born Australians are much less likely to vote for minor parties and independents. Among Chinese-born Australians, 48% support the Labor Party, compared to 34% for the Coalition. That's a gap of 14 percentage points, so far more favourable to the ALP than the federal election result. If you want to learn more about the voting habits of Indian-born and Chinese-born immigrants, there's more detail on the Roy Morgan website, including the levels of support among different age groups. And finally, Roy Morgan's annual Trusted Brand Awards were held last Wednesday. These Trusted Brand Awards recognise 22 winning brands across a range of industry for their high levels of trust, as awarded by the people that we interviewed, Australian people. An impressive 16 of this year's winners built on their win a year ago to go back-to-back as their most trusted brands in their respective categories. There were also some newbies. Notable winners this year included Aldi, Kmart, Apple, Toyota, Commonwealth Bank, Bunnings, Australia Post, NRMA and Samsung, all among Australia's top 20 most trusted brands. And overall, for a second straight year, Bunnings has been awarded as Best of the Best. Today, Bunnings is Australia's most trusted brand. And in the highly contested Agribusiness Trust Awards, for which Roy Morgan interviews thousands of farmers about the brands they trust and distrust, Nutrien Ag Solutions has been awarded as Australia's most trusted agribusiness brand for the very first time. Thanks for your interest in our latest results. For more detail on the topics covered in this video, including the winners of all the categories in the annual Trusted Brand Awards, head to the Roy Morgan website. I'll be back next week to bring you the latest data for consumer confidence, inflation expectations, and we'll be looking at mortgage stress. Thanks for listening.